The courthouse building felt cold that morning. The air inside carried the smell of old paper and floor cleaner. People moved through the long halls with quick steps. Some came to work. Some came to watch. Some came to judge. Samuel Brown arrived before sunrise as he always did. He was a janitor and he wore a dark uniform that had faded over time. He carried a small bucket and a mop that had seen many long days. He knew every corner of the building. He knew which doors stuck and which lights flickered. He also knew the quiet stories that lived behind closed rooms. Samuel did his work without noise. He wiped dust from benches. He cleaned the glass at the entrance. He swept the hallway near courtroom 3. That courtroom was busy today. He could tell by the number of cameras and the tight faces. A famous case was starting that morning. The name Robert Hill was on every phone screen. Robert Hill was a billionaire known for tall buildings and big donations. People once spoke his name with pride. Now they spoke it with sharp excitement. Many wanted to see him lose everything. Samuel did not care about fame. He cared about truth. He cared about work. He cared about the simple promise of doing the right thing. He also remembered kindness when he saw it. Years earlier Samuel had not been okay. His wife Mary had been very sick. The hospital bills had grown like a heavy shadow. Samuel had worked extra hours and still could not catch up. He had sold small things from his home. He had skipped meals and smiled anyway. He had kept his fear quiet because his children were watching. One night he had been sitting in a hospital hallway. He had been holding a paper with numbers he could not pay. His hands had been shaking. His eyes had been tired and red. A man in a suit had walked by and stopped. That man had been Robert Hill. Robert had asked one simple thing. Robert had asked what was wrong. Samuel had tried to say it was fine. Robert had not accepted that. Robert had listened without rushing. Robert had made a call and spoken in a calm voice. Robert had told Samuel to go back to his family. Robert had paid the bill quietly and left without a crowd. Samuel had never forgotten that moment. Now Samuel stood in the courthouse hallway and watched people gather. Reporters whispered near the doors. A guard kept the line moving. The prosecutor arrived with a confident smile. A group of lawyers walked in together like they owned the floor. Samuel kept cleaning, but he listened. He heard the words fraud and theft and betrayal. He heard people say Robert Hill had finally been caught. Samuel did not like the joy in their voices. He had seen many trials. He had seen how fast people picked a side. He had seen how easily a story could be shaped. He had also seen how fear could push people to lie. He stayed quiet and kept working. Inside courtroom 3, Robert Hill sat at the defense table. Samuel could see him through the open door for a moment. Robert looked smaller than the pictures online. His suit was clean but his face was tired. His hands were clasped together like he was holding himself together. His eyes moved across the room as if looking for someone safe. Robert had a lawyer next to him. The lawyer wore a sharp suit and a smooth expression. The lawyer looked calm in the way people look when they think they cannot lose. Samuel noticed that Robert did not look calm. Robert looked like a man carrying a secret weight. The judge entered and everyone stood. The room settled into a heavy silence. The prosecutor spoke with strong words. The prosecutor laid out a story with clear steps. The prosecutor said Robert had stolen money from his own company. The prosecutor said Robert had hidden records. The prosecutor said Robert had used power to cover his tracks. The prosecutor pointed to charts and files. The prosecutor spoke as if the ending was already written. Samuel stood near the back wall with his cleaning cart. He was not supposed to be part of the day. He was there to clean and leave. Still he listened and his chest felt tight. He watched Robert as the accusations fell like stones. Robert kept his head up, but his eyes looked strained. Then something strange happened. The defense lawyer leaned close to Robert. The defense lawyer whispered something. Robert turned his head with surprise. The defense lawyer stood up. The defense lawyer reached for his briefcase. The defense lawyer snapped it shut with a hard sound. The defense lawyer walked toward the door. At first people thought it was a break. Then the lawyer kept walking. The lawyer did not look back. The lawyer opened the door and left the courtroom. The door closed behind him. The sound of that door felt louder than it should. A ripple moved through the room. The prosecutor paused as if enjoying the moment. Reporters lifted their phones higher. The judge stared toward the door with a sharp frown. Robert sat frozen for a breath. Then Robert slowly stood up. He looked confused and exposed. The judge spoke with a hard voice. The judge said the court could not stop because of drama. The judge said the trial would proceed. The judge looked at Robert and asked if he had another lawyer ready. Robert swallowed and looked around. Robert had no one to stand with him. Robert said he did not have another lawyer. The room filled with whispers again. Some people laughed softly. Some people shook their heads. Some people leaned forward like they were watching a show. Samuel felt a heat rise in his face. He saw Robert standing alone while a room full of people enjoyed it. Samuel remembered the hospital hallway. Samuel remembered how it felt to have no one. Samuel remembered Robert choosing to help when he did not have to. Samuel took one step forward. Then he stopped. His mind argued with itself. He was only a janitor. He did not have a law degree. He did not have money or status. He did have eyes and ears and years of watching people. He did have a steady sense of right and wrong. He also had a stubborn heart. Samuel looked at Robert again. Robert looked like a man drowning in a room full of dry people. Samuel gripped the handle of his cart. He felt fear in his stomach. He felt it in his throat. He felt it in his hands. Then he felt something stronger than fear. He felt a duty that came from memory and gratitude. Samuel stepped into the open space of the courtroom. The sound of his shoes drew attention. A guard glanced at him. People turned their heads with surprise. Samuel stopped near the center aisle. He lifted his chin and spoke loudly enough to cut through the noise. Samuel said he would defend Robert Hill. The courtroom went still. Even the cameras paused for a beat. The judge stared at him as if the world had tilted. The prosecutor blinked and then smirked. Robert turned around slowly with wide eyes. Samuel stood there with his uniform and his mop cart behind him. He did not look powerful. He did not look important. He looked determined. The judge asked who Samuel was. Samuel said his name and his job. The judge said this was not a place for jokes. Samuel said it was not a joke. Samuel said he knew Robert as a man who once helped a stranger. Samuel said he could not watch him be abandoned. Samuel said he believed the truth had not been heard. The judge called for a short recess. The judge struck the gavel and ordered the room to settle. People exploded into whispers again. Reporters rushed toward the hallway to send updates. Robert stood still and stared at Samuel. Samuel felt his legs shake, but he did not step back. He knew his life had just changed. He also knew he could not undo what he had said. Robert finally spoke in a quiet voice. Robert asked Samuel why he would do this. Samuel looked at him and answered with calm honesty. Samuel said a good deed should not die in silence. Samuel said no man should stand alone when he is fighting for his life. Samuel said he would try even if he failed. The bailiff called everyone back into the room. Samuel took a slow breath. He placed his cart to the side. He walked toward the defense table with steady steps. The room watched him like he was a surprise storm. The judge looked down from the bench with a guarded face. The prosecutor watched with a smile that carried confidence. Robert sat down and kept his eyes on Samuel. Samuel sat beside him and felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. The trial was about to continue and Samuel had no idea what would happen next. The courtroom settled again after the recess. People returned to their seats with restless energy. The judge looked serious and alert. The prosecutor adjusted his papers with calm confidence. Robert sat quietly with his hands folded. Samuel sat beside him, feeling the weight of many eyes. Samuel had never sat at this table before. He had always stood near walls and corners. Now he was in the center of the room. His uniform felt heavier than usual. His heart beat slowly but strongly. He reminded himself to breathe. The judge spoke carefully and clearly. He asked Samuel if he understood the seriousness of the situation. Samuel said yes in a steady voice. The judge asked if Samuel had legal training. Samuel said no without shame. The room reacted with soft laughter. The prosecutor stood up quickly. He said this was improper. He said the court was being disrespected. He said a janitor could not replace a lawyer. He asked the judge to remove Samuel immediately. The judge raised a hand for silence. The judge looked at Samuel for a long moment. The judge asked why Samuel believed he could help. Samuel stood slowly. Samuel spoke with calm respect. Samuel said he had worked in this building for many years. Samuel said he had seen many trials begin and end. Samuel said he had watched people with power escape truth. Samuel said he had also seen innocent people crushed by fear. Samuel said he believed Robert was not being heard. The judge leaned forward slightly. The judge asked if Samuel had any evidence. Samuel nodded and reached into a small worn bag. Samuel pulled out a thin folder. The folder looked old and handled many times. Samuel explained how he cleaned offices late at night. Samuel explained how people threw away papers carelessly. Samuel explained how he found documents weeks earlier. Samuel explained how the names on those documents stayed in his mind. Samuel explained how he kept them because something felt wrong. The prosecutor objected loudly. The judge allowed Samuel to continue. The judge ordered the clerk to receive the documents. The clerk took the folder and made copies. The room leaned forward in silence. Samuel pointed to the papers on the screen. Samuel said these documents showed approvals and transfers. Samuel said the signatures did not belong to Robert. Samuel said another name appeared again and again. Samuel said the finance director approved everything. The prosecutor shifted his stance. The prosecutor said Samuel could not understand financial records. Samuel answered calmly. Samuel said reading numbers was not hard. Samuel said patterns told stories. Samuel described how money moved. Samuel described how timing mattered. Samuel described how Robert was away during key decisions. Samuel described how reports were altered later. Samuel spoke slowly so everyone could follow. Robert looked at the screen with growing disbelief. He had never seen these papers before. His lawyer had never shown them. His chest felt tight with confusion and relief. He realized something had been hidden from him. The judge asked the prosecutor to respond. The prosecutor tried to dismiss the papers. The prosecutor said they lacked context. The prosecutor said they were incomplete. The judge did not look convinced. Samuel asked permission to speak again. The judge allowed it. Samuel turned toward the jury. Samuel spoke in plain words. Samuel said he was not educated like lawyers. Samuel said he did not know fancy terms. Samuel said he knew when a man was being used. Samuel said he had seen fear before. Samuel said fear made people push blame onto others. The jury watched him closely. They did not laugh now. They listened carefully. They saw honesty in his posture. They saw no reward in his effort. The prosecutor tried to attack Samuel's credibility. The prosecutor asked why a janitor would get involved. The prosecutor asked what Samuel gained. Samuel answered simply. Samuel said he gained peace. Samuel said Robert once helped him when he was broken. Samuel said no cameras were present then. Samuel said kindness was real even without witnesses. Samuel said he could not stay silent now. Robert lowered his head. His eyes filled with tears. He remembered that night clearly. He never thought it would return like this. The judge called for a brief pause. The jury whispered quietly among themselves. The prosecutor looked unsettled. Reporters typed rapidly. The mood in the room had changed. When the court resumed, the judge asked Samuel one more question. The judge asked if Samuel knew the risks. The judge asked if Samuel was afraid. Samuel answered honestly. Samuel said yes, he was afraid. Samuel said fear did not mean stopping. Samuel said fear sometimes meant moving forward anyway. Samuel said truth deserved that chance. The judge nodded slowly. The judge allowed Samuel to remain for now. The judge said the evidence would be reviewed carefully. The judge warned everyone to keep order. The gavel struck and echoed through the room. As the session continued, Samuel stayed alert. He took notes on scrap paper. He listened closely to every word. He watched reactions carefully. He noticed tension on the prosecutor's face. Robert leaned toward Samuel quietly. Robert asked where he got the strength. Samuel answered softly. Samuel said strength grows when silence feels wrong. The afternoon light moved across the courtroom windows. Time passed without anyone noticing. The case no longer felt simple. Doubt had entered the room. Certainty had begun to crack. When the judge finally adjourned for the day, the room released a deep breath. People stood and talked excitedly. Reporters rushed toward the exits. The prosecutor left without confidence. Robert remained seated for a moment. Samuel stood beside him quietly. Robert thanked him in a low voice. Samuel said it was not over yet. Samuel said tomorrow would be harder. They walked out together slowly. The hallway lights hummed softly. Samuel picked up his cart again. He was still a janitor. But now he carried something heavier than a mop. He carried responsibility. He carried truth. He carried the next step of a fight no one expected him to take. The next morning the courthouse felt different. The hallways were louder and more crowded. News had spread overnight. People whispered about the janitor who stood up in court. Some spoke with surprise. Some spoke with doubt. Some spoke with respect. Samuel arrived early again. He wore the same uniform. He carried the same mop and bucket. But his walk was slower and heavier. He knew eyes were watching him now. He ignored them and focused forward. Robert arrived soon after. He looked more alert than the day before. Sleep had been light, but hope had kept him standing. He nodded at Samuel when he saw him. Samuel returned the nod quietly. When court began, the judge wasted no time. The judge said the case had reached a critical point. The judge said new evidence required deeper review. The prosecutor stood stiff and tense. His confidence had faded slightly. Samuel remained calm at the table. He reviewed his notes carefully. They were simple words written in uneven lines. They were reminders of dates, names, and moments. He trusted them more than memory alone. The prosecutor began questioning again. He focused on past statements. He tried to confuse timelines. He raised his voice at times. He tried to make Samuel nervous. Samuel listened fully before answering. He did not rush his words. He answered only what was asked. He stayed grounded and clear. The prosecutor accused Samuel of misunderstanding records. Samuel responded that truth did not hide behind noise. The room stayed silent. The judge then allowed Samuel to question a witness. This was the moment Samuel had prepared for all night. His hands shook slightly as he stood. He steadied himself and looked forward. The witness was David Cole. David had once been the finance director. He walked in wearing a neat suit. His posture was stiff. His face looked tired and pale. Samuel looked at David carefully. He spoke calmly and with respect. Samuel asked David about his role in the company. David answered with confidence at first. Samuel asked about approvals. David said Robert gave them. Samuel asked about emails. David hesitated before answering. Samuel asked the clerk to show the screen. The email appeared for everyone to see. It showed David explaining transfers as routine. It showed Robert responding with trust. The courtroom leaned forward together. David shifted his weight. His voice weakened. Samuel asked if Robert had ever asked to hide money. David paused. David said no. A ripple moved through the room. The prosecutor stood quickly. The judge ordered him to sit. Samuel continued gently. Samuel asked why reports were changed later. David swallowed hard. David looked toward the prosecutor briefly. The judge instructed David to answer honestly. David lowered his head. David admitted he made changes himself. Gasps filled the courtroom. Reporters froze for a second before typing wildly. Robert closed his eyes slowly. His chest shook with quiet emotion. Samuel asked the final question. Samuel asked why David blamed Robert. David took a deep breath. David said he was afraid. David said pressure came from fear of loss. David said he chose the wrong path. David said he was sorry. The judge ordered a recess immediately. The room erupted in noise. Guards escorted David away. The prosecutor sat frozen. Robert stayed seated. Samuel placed a steady hand on the table. Neither spoke. They did not need to. When court resumed, the judge spoke firmly. The judge said the truth was becoming clear. The judge said the jury would consider everything carefully. The prosecutor attempted one last push. He tried to minimize the confession. His voice lacked strength now. Samuel addressed the jury one final time. He spoke simply. He said power should never replace truth. He said silence allows lies to grow. He said courage can come from unexpected places. The jury watched him closely. Some nodded slowly. Some wiped their eyes. The judge ended the session for the day. The decision would come soon. The courtroom emptied slowly. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited. Robert and Samuel walked past them quietly. They did not speak to reporters. That evening Samuel sat alone at home. He stared at the wall in silence. Fear crept in again. He wondered if he had done enough. He wondered what tomorrow would bring. He remembered his wife smiling softly years ago. He remembered his children sleeping peacefully. He remembered why he stood up. The night passed slowly. Morning arrived faster than expected. The final day had come. The final morning arrived with a gray sky. The air outside the courthouse felt sharp and cold. People gathered early as if they feared missing the ending. Cameras lined the steps. Reporters spoke into microphones with serious faces. Strangers stood shoulder to shoulder waiting for the doors to open. Samuel walked through the crowd quietly. He kept his eyes forward. He held his small bag close to his side. His uniform looked the same as always. But his face carried a calm strength that had grown through the week. Robert arrived a few minutes later. He stepped out of a car with slow, careful movements. He looked tired, but he no longer looked broken. He nodded at Samuel as they walked together inside. Samuel nodded back without words. The courtroom filled quickly. The jury sat in their seats with quiet focus. The judge entered and everyone stood. The prosecutor sat stiff and silent. The defense table felt different now. It no longer felt like a place of defeat. The judge reminded the room that this was a serious moment. The judge told everyone to remain calm. The judge asked the jury if they had reached a decision. The jury foreman stood. His hands held a paper that looked too small for such a big outcome. Robert's breathing became shallow. Samuel kept his posture steady beside him. Samuel did not look at the crowd. He looked at the judge and waited. The judge asked for the verdict to be read. The foreman spoke clearly. He said not guilty. He said not guilty again for the remaining charges. His voice did not shake. The courtroom went silent for a single heartbeat. Then the room erupted with noise. Some people gasped. Some people shouted. Some people looked angry. Some people looked relieved. Reporters rushed toward the aisle. Cameras flashed in bright bursts. Robert sat frozen for a moment. His eyes filled and his shoulders dropped as if a mountain slid away. He placed one hand over his mouth and tried to control his breathing. Tears slipped down his face without permission. He had been holding pain for so long that release felt unfamiliar. Samuel stayed still. He did not celebrate loudly. He did not raise his hands. He simply closed his eyes for one quiet moment. He breathed in and out slowly. He felt gratitude settle into his chest like warm light. The judge struck the gavel. The judge ordered the room to calm down. The judge dismissed the jury with thanks. The judge warned the courtroom about disorder. The prosecutor gathered his papers and avoided looking up. Robert stood and turned to Samuel. His face was wet with tears. His voice shook as he spoke. He told Samuel that he saved him. He told Samuel that he gave him his life back. Samuel answered in a soft voice. Samuel said truth saved him. Samuel said he only carried it into the light. Robert shook his head and held Samuel's hand tightly. For a moment the billionaire and the janitor looked like two ordinary men. They looked like two people who had survived something heavy together. As they stepped out of the courtroom, reporters surrounded them. Questions flew through the air from every direction. People asked why the lawyer left. People asked who Samuel was. People asked if Robert would sue. People asked if Samuel would become famous. Robert raised one hand and the noise lowered slightly. He spoke with a clear voice. He said he would answer one thing only. He pointed to Samuel and said that man showed courage when others walked away. Robert said he would never forget it. Samuel remained quiet. He did not enjoy the attention. He did not chase applause. He walked forward and kept moving. Later that afternoon, Robert asked Samuel to meet him in a private room. The room was small with plain chairs and a table. No cameras were allowed inside. Robert wanted privacy for this moment. Robert placed a folder on the table. Robert said he wanted to reward Samuel properly. Robert offered money and a high position in his company. Robert offered a house in a safe area. Robert offered a car and security. Samuel listened carefully. He took a slow breath before answering. Samuel said he did not stand up for reward. Samuel said he stood up because it was right. Robert said that was exactly why Samuel deserved reward. Samuel then made a request. Samuel asked Robert to help the courthouse workers. Samuel asked for better pay for janitors, guards, and clerks. Samuel asked for safer equipment and fair schedules. Samuel asked for a small scholarship fund for their children. Robert stared at Samuel for a moment. His eyes softened. He asked why Samuel would think of others first. Samuel said struggle teaches people to notice struggle. Samuel said a man cannot forget the hands that hold the building together. Robert nodded slowly. Robert said yes. Robert said he would do all of it. Robert said he would do it in a way that could not be ignored. Within days, changes began. New uniforms arrived for workers. Better supplies were delivered. A clear plan for fair wages was approved. People in the courthouse talked about it with disbelief. Some workers cried quietly when they signed the new papers. Some workers hugged each other in the hallway. Samuel returned to his usual routine. He pushed his cart through the same halls. He cleaned the same benches. He wiped the same glass doors. But something had shifted. People greeted him now. They looked him in the eye. They said good morning with real respect. Samuel did not let it change who he was. He still worked with care. He still stayed humble. He still avoided pride. He understood that the moment in court did not make him better. It simply revealed what was already inside him. Robert visited the courthouse again one morning. He came without a crowd. He wore a simple coat and carried a small box. He found Samuel in the hallway near courtroom 3. Robert handed him the box. Inside was a pen with Samuel's name engraved. There was also a short note. The note thanked him for courage. The note thanked him for reminding him what real loyalty looked like. Samuel held the pen gently. He did not speak right away. He finally said thank you. Robert smiled and said he meant it. They walked together for a few minutes. They spoke about small things. They spoke about family and work and quiet dreams. They did not speak like rich and poor. They spoke like humans. When Robert left, Samuel returned to his cart. He looked down the hallway at the courtroom door. He remembered how fear felt when he first stepped forward. He remembered how the room laughed. He remembered how his voice still came out steady. Samuel kept moving through the courthouse. He cleaned as the day went on. But inside him something remained bright. He knew one choice can change many lives. He knew one voice can break a wall of silence. He knew courage does not belong only to people with titles. He knew the truth can come from the most unexpected place.